Alright, how's it going, guys? So today, this is going to be another gameplay analysis video, but I mean, it's going to be kind of different, I suppose. Well, technically, this is a Xiukai analysis. This entire video can be applied essentially to any character within the conservative spectrum. And I tend to reference my own content a lot, so I'll link in the description my video on the offensive spectrum. If you haven't seen that, I highly encourage you to go watch it. I personally think it's one of the best videos that I've made, and a lot of information from that video I'm going to be drawing to be used right here as well. I'll also link the Discord server invite to the Block Survival Hangout server in the description as well. If you're not a part of the community, highly encourage you to join as well. Now I'm going to be doing a brief introduction, and like when I say brief, you all know what that means. I'll probably try to put on the screen a time saying when the introduction actually ends. But anyways, I'm going to be doing this introduction kind of before I actually get into the gameplay, so please bear with me. But as I've mentioned in previous videos, the premise of conservative play is typically to avoid combat in its entirety. A lot of people laugh at how far behind my weapon manufacturing is when people watch me stream and stuff. But people don't kind of understand how irrelevant your damage output is when you're playing super conservatively. Like, playing semi-conservative, I'd agree that your weapon and your damage isn't irrelevant. It's kind of it's relevant when you're trying to punish people for being out of position or stuff along the lines of that. But if you run into somebody with like 20% health, playing like a very conservative playstyle, you're not really going to be able to punish them for that, because you're going to be dealing like one damage to them. So really, master weapons are essentially put on the back burner in favor of committing to sustainability and survivability. Another thing to mention is that kind of super conservative play can be really achieved by basically any character in the game, because like the focus is on resources, on survivability, and on map awareness. So obviously, typically you would prefer a character with good scaling defensive stats, survivability abilities. But again, in my opinion, at the very least, you can kind of roach with almost every character on the cast to a certain level of effectiveness. And one last thing I want to mention is, or well, maybe not one last thing, but one last kind of off-topic thing is I had a lot of kind of like high-level tech for maximizing the cooking output from Xiukai. I had a lot of information written down on the subject, a lot of notes, but recently we've all learned that cooking is getting removed from the game as an ability in its entirety. So really, there's no point for me to waste your time with that because like it's getting removed. So a little bit unfortunate there because like I spent a lot of time trying to figure out the best ways to combo food to get the most bang for your buck rather. But yeah, it's getting removed. All that being said, let's talk about this quote-unquote route that I'm going to be going over. And like I said, this is applicable for a lot of different characters. So typically the place I like to start is at the school. And that's because the school is one of the only places that's both low traffic but high yield in items. Starting the school gives you access to a large pool of armor options, as well as food and stamina options. And the two most important things you need to get here is the Windbreaker and the Alcohol. And it goes without saying, obviously, that you're going to be using Breadseek as your aptitude, but the Alcohol is going to be giving you enough resources to typically sustain yourself through building almost your entire armor set. And by the time you run out, if you even run out, you generally have built something like healing potions or another recovery item that you've got while you've been going along the route.
Make it quick. I'm gonna feast with dumplings.
Now, you'll mention I picked up a bunch of additional ingredients, additional items from the school while I was there as well that I hadn't really mentioned previously. So, you're also going to be aiming to get the arm warmers, a bike helmet, and a pen, if you can. These last items are what you could consider your flex items. So, these are items that you build by reacting to what you find. So, arm warmers can very easily go into Sword Stopper, and I have to mention really quick as well that that's getting buffed really soon, so that's pretty nice. But if you don't find arm warmers in time, we can invest our cell phone into Galaxy Watch, because by default, we're going to be looking to build into that just kind of as a versatile ingredient. And it goes the other way around as well. If you can't find a pen, you can just commit into Sword Stopper and Tiara. And I mentioned bike helmet here, and I want to talk about that quickly as well. So what we're aiming to get is Tiara of Light, but both the circlet and the military helm are considered flex items to me because you kind of want to build into what's easiest for you to access. So for instance, if you're bullied out of the cemetery before you get a second branch, something like that, then you can kind of just commit your cell phone into the OPS.
Stop fluttering.
Now, I really quickly want to touch on what it kind of did right here. It doesn't really look like it did anything, so that's kind of why I want to touch up on it. So, I'm always going to be equipping the diving suit over the military jacket, and that may seem irrelevant because they're both the same armor class. It's always important to equip your diving suit over your military jacket because if you have a full inventory and you have military jacket equipped and diving suit in your inventory, and you have this iron sheet in your inventory as well, but your full inventory, you won't be able to craft a battle suit. You'll have to like drop things or you'll have to re-equip things. But if you have the diving suit equipped and the military jacket in your inventory with the iron sheet in the inventory, then you can craft the bulletproof vest in your inventory without dropping anything, without moving anything around.
I will store.
So in the early game, I typically try my best to cycle between three main areas with a kind of a few sub areas for specific items, I suppose. But the three main areas I tend to cycle between are the school, which I mentioned I always prefer to start here, and I went over the items that I try to get there. The cemetery for 2 branches, a flower, and a hairband, and the beach for a swimsuit, rubber, bullets if I have a biking helmet, and 2 pieces of scrap metal. Now, the chapel is also a decent kind of sub area if you need the scrap metal, as it also gives you early access to the very important Angel Wing, as well as a few RNG potential items to get stuff like Cross of Goth or Holy Water. We can also substitute the second scrap if we don't find it in time. But we need to at the very least get 1 here. So it's worth mentioning that you can also find rubber at both the school and the cemetery, so that's a cool thing to note as well. So if you get the rubber, then the docks are also a viable sub area for you to go if you just can't contest the beach because there's too many people there. However, if you go to the docks, you'll basically need to get the hammer here, and then you'll typically need to follow up going from the docks to go into the factory for your scrap metal and your wires, whereas the beach would send you to Town Hall. And in general, going to Town Hall is kind of preferred. Another substitute for the cemetery is the forest, as you can get the branches and you can get the flower here, and you can actually build into the herb right here, which is nice as well. And then you can just get the hairband at the Town Hall later. And also, if you pass leather while you're in the forest, you should also pick this up. That's also kind of an important thing. It gives you a little bit more options in terms of leg armor later on.
With your tendon. I will. Yeah! Hi-yah!
So when you get to Town Hall, this is where the flex items kind of dictate the direction of your build. So if you find a slipper and you have 2 scrap metals, then you're obviously going to be building into kill heals. If you find a cloth while you have the leather, or if you weren't able to get 2 scrap metals, then you're going to start building into the battle boots. If you got a pen, which ideally you did while you were at the school, you're going to start building here into the blueprints. But the main thing, obviously, that you need to get here is the hammer. And this is going to be able to complete your battle suit, as well as going to be able to upgrade your arm warmers.
Stop fluttering like a fish. Butchering is... Yeah! Butcher. Butchering is a part of cooking. Hi-yah! I will start with Yeah! Hi-yah!
Now, after the Town Hall, we're looking to kind of further build into our headgear, either OPS or Tiara of Light. If you've gotten a really good early game and you have blueprints, but you've built into both armors that do not require the cell phone, meaning the Tiara and the arm warmers, then you're just going to be dropping the booze band to make the Galaxy Watch. So there's a few main areas here we want to cycle through in this mid-game. So the tunnel, the fire station, the residential areas, the chapel, and the woodland areas. So we're going to be cycling through all these areas to get all the kind of items that we need. And again, the order will be dictated by the traffic in each area, but I generally prefer going to the tunnel directly after, and then after that going to the hotel. And the tunnel is important for 1 wire if we didn't make the blueprints, and obviously 2 wires if we did make the blueprints. And if you get the blueprints and the wire, then you're going to be going pretty much directly after from the tunnel to the fire station or lighthouse to finish off your cell phone, because the inventory will be really hard to manage otherwise because you've got the blueprints and the wire in your inventory. In addition to wires, as I mentioned previously, you'll want to get as many glass bottles as you can afford the time. And ideally, you'll want to pick up a stone so you can start making it into glass pieces. Stones are also nice to kind of hold on to in the mid-game here in case you get a Tree of Life. The fire station also gives you, like I said, the battery if you're building into the cell phone, gives you the watch if you're building into the Galaxy Watch, it gives you the boots if you're building into battle boots, and it gives you a hammer if you still need the hammer after all this time, as well as just some stamina sustain with water and stuff. The woodland areas give us access to a feather for Angel Wing, gives us access to boots, like I said, if we need them, a stone if we didn't get that from the temple, as well as a lot of food options as well. This is actually going to be kind of like super out of order because I just said something about glass bottles, and I said like I had said, but I actually hadn't talked about it yet. So while I'm on the subject here, I need to add something about food. A lot of things actually about food, and this is super important because food is it's an integral part of this system. Food is the battery that allows defensive play to function as effectively as it does. So first, I want to bring up some ingredients you should never pass up, and ingredients are just good to have on your person as often as possible. So first is the flour. Into the late game, the flour becomes increasingly hard to find when you consider that you don't have the capabilities to really hunt the bear in the late game. This isn't just because of like the damage that the bear deals to you, but because of how long it takes to kill the bear with your damage output. It's almost guaranteed. It is guaranteed that you're going to be giving away your location, and in giving away your location, especially where the bear is, you're essentially feeding your opponents the bear. So another thing is people pick up flowers as as accessory fillers in their early game all the time, and then they drop them in random places all around the map as they get better items, or they just use them in crafting. So either way, the flower is a very integral part for a lot of the recipes. It's for herbs, for petal dews, 2 of which are kind of the most standard food items that you will be crafting with this build. So for that reason, anytime you have access to a flower and you have the slot to spare, you should be equipping it. For a similar reason, glass bottles from the tunnel are also extremely valuable, and you should be holding on to these whenever you see them. Because of how easy herbs are to craft, especially when you consider that you're going to be hoarding flowers whenever possible, it's safe to assume that if you hold onto a glass bottle, you will end up using it. So typically, and honestly, most players most players just in general, will only visit the tunnel kind of once in a game for like actually looking for a lot of items. So you need to take advantage of the time you spend in that area. Coming back to the tunnel just for a glass bottle is a really awkward thing to do, and often you just won't. You'll just use the herbs as healing items, and yeah, often a lot of times if you do go there just for the glass ball, it's a waste of time, and like I said, a lot of times you won't. So just hold on to the glass balls when you go through. They're actually really good. Healing potions are just really good, and a lot of times it's worth it to spend extra time when you are at the tunnel searching for stuff like wires and stones and whatever. A lot of times it's worth it just to spend extra time just to get the glass bottle, and like that's how important it is. Another thing, albeit a much rarer item, is tuna. You should never drop tuna. Tuna is really good. Same with stuff like scrolls of Dongi. And while we're talking about that, I'm going to say something really quick. So hospital is a really weird topic for me to cover in this type of playstyle. So like the amount of healing you get from even just a small trip to the hospital is often just ridiculous value. But generally, because of how much value the hospital offers, I try to avoid it because of just how high traffic it is as a result. So obviously, you should take advantage of the hospital whenever an opportunity arises if you take advantage of it. But you always have to be very careful, and you always have to be very quick to react when you're searching in that area, because like I said, it's almost always very high traffic. And as I mentioned about Scrolls of Dongyi, Scrolls of Dongyi and pills, you should always be trying to build into their second stage items. You don't really want to be eating naked pills because you're losing a lot of healing potential. So you should always be looking to build those into the second stage items. The healing it offers is really good. And one last thing that you should probably never pass up on when you're playing very defensive, as long as you have the inventory slots to spare. Obviously, if you're in the middle of crafting a whole bunch of armor, you probably won't. A lot of this information is more applicable when you have finished your build, because that's basically the second you finish building your armor, you want to fill up your entire inventory slot, like every inventory slot you have with food and with recovery items. So that's why it's so important. But anyways, as long as you have the inventory slots, as long as you've kind of finished off your armor, you should be trying to hold on to cooking pots that you find as well. Because one thing is cooking pots stack, so you can get like 3 cooking pots, and then you can just go to the pond and get an insane amount of recovery off that. So cooking pots stack, and that's really, really nice because that's in itself almost just a massive stack. It's a massive stack of potential or theoretical healing. So yeah, cooking pots are another really, really nice thing that you should try your best to never pass up on. So into this part of the game, kind of the beginning of the late game, I'm going to be frequenting the residential areas a lot. So in particular, the slums, the hotel, and the uptown. So all these areas are going to give me glass for glass pieces, which is going to be important. A lot of times we're going to need 2 to build into the kill heals or into the Terra respectively. Sometimes we're just going to need 1. But what's also very important is that they each offer some form of recovery item to build into. And you're going to need to be taking advantage of these flex drops. So residential areas like the slums and alley also offer extra cloth if you need them to be building into the battle boots. And I'm basically just going to be working here to finish off all my items. So Tiara of Light at this point in time it's a priority because like if you didn't make Angel Wing earlier, it's a priority because the ingredients are at risk of being restricted if the chapel goes down. You'll also of course notice that I finished off my Sword Stopper as well. And if we get time later, we can start building in between food items. We can start picking up ingredients to upgrade our weapons. So maybe while we're at the slum, we pick up lighter, we pick up scrap. Maybe while we're at the hotel, we pick up a whetstone, and we can just upgrade our weapon to parallel sword like that if we get the time.
a fish. Stop fluttering like a fish.
You might notice, you might not have noticed, it might get a little bit more noticeable very soon, but I'm self-healing a lot, and I've said in the past how detrimental self-healing is on offense, but when you're playing conservatively, you want to be self-healing in the late game, whenever you have the opportunity. This is basically because you finish your build quicker than most balanced players, because you aren't focusing on gaining mastery or basically brawling or anything like that, so you've got a bit more leeway when it comes to investing time to heal, so long as obviously you're not wasting time when you could be finishing off armor and stuff, obviously. So like I said, this is very, very into the late game. So like I said, unless you're wasting time when you could be building food items or could be building other stuff, self-healing it's great because it keeps you from using your resources. And like I said, this is generally relevant in kind of generally the third last round, as typically you'll have a full inventory of healing items and the map is open enough to kind of hide and just heal. And like I said, this is really, really important because moving into the second last round, where there's only 3 areas left, minimizing how much food you consume becomes very, very important. Because like I said, these are the resources. There's only 3 areas. You're going to start taking more hits than you had previously been taking in the previous round. So like I said, it becomes very, very important how you manage your food, and any extra amount of food that you have, whether it's because you spent a minute or so just self-healing as opposed to just using a 40 HP healing. Any extra healing starts to come very, very important. Obviously, like I have to reiterate one more time, like this is pushing into the third last round where you have full inventory slots of recovery items. So at this point, like I said, self-healing it's a very, very good thing, because like I said, you're saving resources. If you don't have the resources, you're not saving resources. But if you have, like I said, full inventory of resources, then you're saving resources just by self-healing. And that's why it's very, very important.
Butchering is a part of cooking. Hi-yah! Butcher. Yeah! We'll start with your tendon. Stop fluttering like a fit. Whoa.
Now, this is the last time I'm going to talk before the actual conclusion, so it's the last time I'm going to be talking about the gameplay itself. And what you're going to see right here is kind of an optimized way of moving around the map. Obviously, it's a little bit more relevant for the conservative play right here because you're going to want to be using that time to attack people if you're playing a more offensive role. But playing in the conservative spectrum, this is a very efficient way to kind of optimize your time. So it's important to kind of constantly be in motion. I'm a little less in motion in this gameplay because I have the radar. The radar actually tells me when people enter an area and when I'm the only one in an area. But typically, you're going to want to be spamming moving areas, moving between these when you're in the last three areas right here, which is why things like Angel Wings, Battle Boots, and stuff like this are really, really nice because it cuts down on the stamina consumption. Now, we know there's a couple seconds before you can move areas, and we know that you can activate certain abilities mid-entering area animation. And I might do a very small video on basically this right here in its entirety, but basically, for the small window of time that you can't move areas, I'm going to be healing or resting, and I'm doing that to kind of optimize the time that I'm doing things. Using actions that you can activate during the entering area animation is really important to try to use as often as you can. Like, you may as well. Like I said, I won't try to explain as much of it right here, because I mentioned I'm going to try to probably do a tutorial for it, but in general, you can pretty much see exactly how to do it just by watching the gameplay right here. So yeah, that's basically it. I hope I was able to explain most of the kind of decision making that I took throughout this video. And a lot of people tend to really kind of look down on conservative play for two reasons. The first being that it's a super boring way to play, and yeah, I can respect that. I can definitely see where that perspective is coming from. But the other thing people tend to say when they hate on conservative or cockroaching as a playstyle is that it doesn't take much skill to use. And that's just really not true. Like, it's definitely a more reliable, albeit slower way to rank up, but it's a legitimate way to play the game. Like, you can't hate on people who get to Dragon by playing conservative unless you've gotten to Dragon by playing conservative yourself. Like, it doesn't make sense for you to tear something down if you can't actually back it up yourself. But one of the main reasons I wanted to cover this playstyle was that it's a very effective way to improve yourself as a player in several different regards. So playing defensively it'll improve your map awareness, it'll improve your reaction time, your mobility, and it's also a very effective way of learning recipes for armors and for recovery items for newer players, as well as how to effectively manage your recovery items to last you through the length of the game. And these are all important skills that are applicable across all different playstyle, but it's just it's so much easier for newer players to learn these skills through this kind of playstyle, through this way of playing. And also one more reason that learning this playstyle will kind of give you more tools in your belt, I would say, is that sometimes, because of kind of the nature of the matchmaking system, the nature of kind of the amount of people that play, you will come up against a lot of times when you queue up in matchmaking, you will eventually come up against like an entire lobby of players who are obviously going to be much better than you. So like if you're a wolf, you're eventually going to come up. This is probably an extreme reaction, but like let's say you're an extreme example, but like let's say you're wolf and you go and you queue up because of the amount of people that are playing, you find 4 dragons and 3 bears and 2 lions. And again, obviously that's an extreme example, but in an example like this, or even in very similar examples but less extreme, playing aggro into that comp is suicide, and it's very easy to lose a lot of rank points by getting 10th place, even against these a lot of players that are like very easily better than you. So learning to play defensively, it'll really help you minimize your rank point loss against what really appears to be like otherwise unwinnable matchups, I suppose. I think that's important to talk about as well. But yeah, that's it. So I'm going to try to make this as a series, kind of go through all the play styles. I feel like that might be kind of fun to do. So leave a like if you enjoyed this, and I guess I'll see you guys next time.